All right. Hello, everybody. This is Dan here at Dan's Astrology, and after much deliberating, I'm here to announce that I'm going to go on another hiatus, perhaps indefinitely, with this astrology channel. Basically, I've had a change of heart, and I'll try to explain to you what's influencing this decision. Now, basically, when it comes to astrology, we're talking about a practice of divination as similar to something like a being a tarot card reader and stuff like this. And in my life, this was always something that sort of interested me, although I didn't get really seriously into it until certain circumstances or certain situation, or a certain change of mindset arose in my life, right? However, part of this had a lot to do with answering these deep questions about who am I, what's my role here, and all this kind of thing. And part of what I've been reflecting on has been that the role of being like somebody who does fortune telling or divinations or stuff like that, there's a period of time in my life where this was not something that was really like at the forefront of my mind as something that I wanted to do or anything like this. And didn't really get very involved in it very much at all. But you know what they say about this kind of stuff is that typically people only want to go see a fortune teller or are looking for some sort of outside help or whatever in that sense if things get kind of desperate, right? If you go through a rough time in your life, things aren't going very well, and you're like, are the stars misaligned or something? Like, what the fuck's going on, right? You're looking for answers, basically. So part of this, what I'm realizing is that when it comes also to the internet, you know, there's all sorts of things that people do in their real life, in their personal life, and then there's this project of making, video blogs to put on YouTube and stuff like this, right? And the thing about this is that in when I am in positions where I have to deal with the community of people out there who are established as fortune tellers or divination people, they tend to show up in the form of old ladies who like in the tea room or the palm readers or something like this, or you know what I'm trying to say. And there's something about all this which is like, this is kind of like not really my. I mean, look, I'm a young man. I'm approaching middle age, but nonetheless, it's sort of like or like there's some sort of situational context in which the tarot reader or the divinator arrives, and usually in this context, it's usually not people looking for me to give advice, but people being like, "Here, young man, sit down. I'll give you some advice," or some sort of like. There's also, it's like a kind of like, what kind of state of mind do you have to be in where you're that motivated to seek counseling or to seek whatever, like some a terror, like it's just something that doesn't happen very much in my ordinary life, or if it would happen, I'm usually not in the position that people are coming to. And so there's a certain kind, I think this is basically what I've realized, is that the internet has become this thing where, despite the fact that I don't occupy that position in my real life, I can just kind of pretend that, like, me. Well, I mean, it's not really pretending, because if you say that you want to do this, and I have done a number of readings for people, it's a difficult thing to make this into a profitable business, or even to attract a regular stream of new clientele and stuff like this. The thing about all this is that it's also contentious because not everybody believes in it. So people may just think that the whole thing is phony and you're just scamming people, right? And there's there's all these considerations about making it somewhat problematic, basically, right? Now, the thing about this too. So basically, I've also realized that part of what makes astrology work is that if I were to do horary astrology, I respect the. I have to admit, sometimes I'm wondering about something, and I may just sort of like ask myself a horary question, like, what the hell's going on right now? And I'll look at my whatever the astrology is in the moment, and then I'll be like, oh, so that's what's going on, and it's sort of like horary, but it's not, because what you need is for horary to work, I think, is you need to have a client ask you a question, and in this sense, it's sort of like it would make more sense if what I don't want to do is become a streamer where people streaming just send me money as donations and ask me horary questions, and yet that's kind of like how this whole structure seems to be set up. But I don't want to do that, really. And basically, what I've started to realize by meeting some people that are more established in this scene, who really, it's like turning astrology into a grind where you're trying to like have as many clients asking as many questions as possible in the like condensed into the most amount of time, and to the point where you can make that profitable, but to the point where like how much attention are you, if you have to do like if your day is packed as if you were like, gonna have like, imagine if you had like an office and a secretary, and you're gonna be just having like you're gonna book half hour, and like a doctor does doctor appointments or something like that, just in and out, in and out, in and out. Like it would be like how much attention are you really gonna give each person? Probably not very much, right? And yet that's what you would have to do for it to be like a feasible business. And even if I think there's also this, one of the things that I suspect watching some other astrologers is that there may be a kind of like an insecurity around the fact that not everybody out there has a unanimous belief that this kind of thing is a legitimate practice or a legitimate kind of thing that you would do as a career or a business. But the thing is, I'm used to that because like I grew up with my dad being a chiropractor, and there's a lot of like heated contention between, let's say, like chiropractors and physiotherapists and all this kind of stuff. And there could be also, or like if you go into the more like holistic, like there's all sorts of people who might have problems with like aromatherapy or what's that stuff, the herbalism, or what's the when you're having the little, I can't remember all the different things. Homeopathic remedies, right? All that stuff. I don't think chiropractic is a bit different. And the thing about it is, it's like, I had so much time growing up with a dad as a chiropractor, and there's so many conversations about like, oh my God, there's all these people getting fucked up because they're having surgery done on their back. When they could, maybe they need a massage, maybe I don't know. But then I don't want to go around. This is the other thing. Okay, which leads me into another part of this. There's this basic mentality, a certain personality type. Basically, I'm going to acknowledge the fact that in my life, I'm not the kind of person that people come to looking for advice and guidance and, all this kind of stuff. And now the question is, what kind of personality type wants to put themselves in that position where you're like, oh, good, I'm getting a whole mob of people ringing my phone every day, with burning questions, wanting me to answer them, so to shed light on the unconscious areas. Like, who actually wants to be in that position, right? And whatever made these, I think it's more questionable to look at the people who are attracted it's the same kind of thing I'm thinking as like the best leaders are the kind of people that don't want to be the leader, that like everybody else thinks that, like, instead of one like narcissistic egomaniacs being like, I want to rule the world and I'll crush anybody, I think it'd be better for like the people to be like, rather than whoever's the most like self-motivated individualist who's just only out for himself, why not get people to be like, let's select somebody who's not like that. and who we think would serve our best interests, right? As a collective, not some narcissistic egomaniac, right? In the same way as like, who's going to be the best person to offer support and guidance? Probably not the person who's really wants to be jumping into that position and doing it, right? And in that same way, I almost went there with the chiropractic thing, because there could be like all sorts of people who are like, only getting invasive surgery done on their back because they tried the chiropractor and it didn't work or something. I don't know. But the point is that who do you want to be, that asshole who's going around acting like everybody who has these problems? Somehow you just have the miraculous insight, and if only everybody listened to you, everything would be better, right? No, like if you really think that's what you want to do, I think you'd be wise to review and question those motivations, right? Okay. And so the thing is, so you've got a couple of things going on. You've got the motivation to be the guy who has all the answers, who can solve all the problems to help everybody. And why would you want to do that, right? Second of all, okay, you've also got this problem of you're doing it in a way which not everybody sees as legitimate. And so you're basically there's a certain insecurity that you're putting. So what I think there's this issue where, because there's insecurity around the validity and of what you're doing, there tends to be this drive to overcompensate for it, where it's like, well, if people can't enough, if it's kind of ambiguous, if this whole thing is real, what isn't ambiguous is the amount of hard work that I put into it. So there's this sort of there's this thing to make up for the fact that it's may not really be real by just overproducing or showing off or all this kind of stuff. And it's just sort of again, another thing, which is I think the point of this is that if you put enough energy into that kind of thing, then you will keep yourself busy enough that you'll be able to forget that you're compensating for something, basically, right? And so that you can basically put yourself into a trance where you just keep going and going and going, and you just forget, oh, I forgot maybe there's something undermining me that is a vulnerability. But if I just keep going, you just keep, no, don't think about any problem, just keep going as fast as possible, crank it out, don't stop, right? If you see, it's like this kind of mentality is get off the goddamn treadmill, okay? And the other thing about this is that there's this whole kind of thing where it's we've got, obviously in the midst of what's going on right now politically, there's this whole kind of thing where in the United States they have these No Kings Day things, which what can I say about that? I'm a Canadian, and in Canada we still have a king, and in some places there have been no tyrants protests, meaning that people are we're okay with our kings, we just don't want other people's presidents being tyrants, right? And it's kind of dumb. But just at that level. But the point is, I can understand from the American level, why they kind of did it in that direction. But there's a certain kind of idea about it where it's we're going to have these we're going to have specific protests that are, get a lot of people out in the street, but it's not a general strike or anything, right? Because there's a basic working, it's okay to express yourself. We're all about freedom of expression, but you got to respect the fact that people still need to work their jobs and pay, put food on the table and all this kind of stuff, right? And so you don't want everything just crashing down to a grinding halt or whatever. And so in the midst of all this, even the people, it's you can keep running this sort of treadmill, but this is a thing. I have to admit, part of the influence of this has been, there's a guy who I saw play a solo set in one of the northern suburbs of Melbourne, Preston or Northcote or something. And this guy, I realized that I was putting a lot of effort into, picking Chinese cotton on the moon, basically, right? And in the midst of, okay, so putting a lot of effort into this thing. Like if I was a real fortune teller, whatever would be going on in this video thing I'm recording would correspond to a real life situation that basically at one point in time, we had this place where a bunch of old ladies were renting out and as like kind of new age tea house kind of thing. And he had fortune tellers and all kinds of stuff. And I think there's like, the thing about this is that I think there's probably more of them out there. I don't even get involved with that stuff anymore, right? I'm not in, like, I'm kind of like, I feel like I'm doing the dumb dodo bird thing, just putting but the thing is, it started to be this thing where it's like, well, it's like funny though, right? Isn't it funny? Like, maybe I can just do it as a joke, right? The point is that it's like, even if you wanted to do that, nobody can afford to because the goddamn fucking real estate's too expensive, right? They were all just going to do this thing where we're just going to have fucking Zoom meetings. And it doesn't really matter if I have, you're going to have a bunch of strangers on the internet, whether I have any credibility in my community or not. Nobody gives a fuck, right? Like nobody, they're just going to be some like random weirdo without, Well, so the other part of this, okay, so like doing this, the picking cotton on the moon, as I'm applying it to my own thing, is basically like, it's not that astrology is just fake and phony, but in my mind, anyways. But like the point is that if you were like, it's become completely untethered to an actual grounded practice with a real life community. And unfortunately, the whole, very online post-COVID world kind of makes that worse, right? And the other thing in this is that, so if and I'm not really generating business of this, I'm just using this as an opportunity to express myself. Then there's this other layer on top of it, which is kind of like a double-edged sword, right? And this is it's a double-edged sword in the sense that anybody who is doing content creation right now is putting them at risk for having their material scraped by the AI machine and perhaps used to nefarious ends, right? And the point is, too, that the double-edged sword of this is that one edge is that it's a vulnerability, basically. Every time you're uploading something and expressing yourself online, it's a vulnerability that your stuff is going to be scraped and appropriated by the AI stuff, right? The second thing is that the other side edge of the sword is that if you are doing astrology, you're in as I see it, you're in some way protected from this, right? Because, and so if anybody else is motivated in starting their own astrology channel, you can take this as a pointer from me. One thing that I've kind of learned, I took a course on, basically one of the things too is that I stopped taking astrology classes and I started taking classes on stuff like AI. I'm not using AI, taking classes on AI to motivate me not to use it, basically, right? But what I've learned about the AI thing, or also if any astrologer who's played around with ChatGPT and all this kind of stuff has probably figured this out, that if you were to be like, if you ask ChatGPT, like, okay, I'm doing this video on, Mars in Aries. So can you give me a list of like famous people who have Mars in Aries as a natal placement? And it will just generate a list and it looks really impressive. And then you're like, okay, let's just double check this. And then you start to find out that it's like more like 75% of it is misinformation, right? So or that when you start asking ChatGPT about, like, this is the picking cotton on the moon thing. If you're asking ChatGPT about astrology, then the ChatGPT is going to like hallucinate things, and it doesn't have any way to actually access an astrology. This is the whole thing. It would be different if you designed AI and integrated it with an astrology software And I don't know. I've heard like some of these dudes, like was it Nick Dagan Best? Is he the one working on it? I don't know. There's all these people who are into like trying to make new astrology software these days, and so maybe some people are already on it. But like you can have a database, basically a glorified search engine that searches a database, and that if it's made by actual astrologers, they'll be able to program it so that it actually works, right? But if the LLMs, like the tools that are the widespread tools that are available, it doesn't have any way to actually look at the astrology itself, right? There's certain giveaways behind this, because if you think about, like, for example, aspects, right? Where, think about this, like with Venus and the Sun, because Venus's orbit is close to the Sun, Venus is never going to square the Sun, because its orbit is never going to get far enough away from the Sun to square the Sun. But you could probably ask ChatGPT, give me a list of Venus square Sun aspects, and it doesn't know how to, like, if you ask that question, it's just going to take what you say as obviously containing this logic which works, and it has no way of verifying what whether it's true or not, because it's not an astrology. Like, it's just going to hallucinate stuff that matches what you say, and there's no way to like actually check a chart and look at it, right? Whereas if you had so there's all this kind of, like, if you get that gist of what I'm saying, that like everything that you're uploading is going to be scraped to be used for AI. But then if you're doing astrology, it automatically protects you from it, because you as a human being have the ability to look at the information and come up with your own delineation in a way that the software isn't really able to. And that, okay, maybe astrologers could program software that did the delineation for you or something like this. But would they then, like, well, there's something, I think there's some kind of thing about, you're basically just outsourcing that function to other, but that's what astrology is anyways, isn't it? Like, you're just like, instead of you figuring out what this means, you're like, oh, what does it say in the book, right? Like, I'm outsourcing it to what was the tradition say when this is here and that's this person, like, what happens, right? You're not coming up with it yourself, you're participating in this whole thing that says when this is over here and that's over there, you can expect this kind of shit going on, right? And it's not you that came up with it, right? So that you're always astrology is already and kind of an artificial intelligence without using any computers, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Divination, even like everybody likes to get into this whole thing about I Ching and various, there's apparently something from Africa, which is like a divination system as well. I don't know, there's all sorts of stuff like this, and it's interesting in some way that where we're at right now, like, there's also this kind of thing about time, right? You got to take into consideration that, I mean, like, when you're talking, when you're recording an astrology video about what's happening with current events, you are participating in history as it's unfolding, and that by, you know what I'm trying to say, is that, like, it would be kind of redundant to get an AI to pretend it's like, you know what I'm trying to say? If you're in the moment, you don't know what's going to happen, and you're recording a vlog of you in the present moment talking about history as it unfolds. I mean, you could get LLMs to be like, can you create like a pretend blog about somebody who was, like, I don't know, 10 years ago, and like what was happening on that day, and like reflecting. But like, the point is that it was 10 years ago. Who gives a shit? And you don't need the AI to do that. You would go back to an actual person for that. Like, it just is just redundant, right? So there's something about, to me, it just seems like there's some kind of like angle to this, where if I was going to do anything on YouTube, astrology makes the most sense for this reason. Because if, let's say, if I was just going to be like, okay, drop the astrology shit and do something else, how do I know I'm not getting plagiarized? How do I not know that I'm not going to be, like, treated in a certain way, and then there's on top of this the whole thing about it's basically this whole thing about like the political dynamic of everything going on. And what I realize is that like if I'm not listening, if I, who am I listening to? People who are like trained economists, trained historians. There's all these people that have worked really hard to become authorities, experts in their field, and I'm just some asshole who took one astrology course, right? And it's like, this is the whole thing, that, and on top of this, okay, it's a red flag if people in your comment section are asking you about that Professor Jang guy, right? Because it's the whole like Professor Jang thing where you're like, you want to like he is an English teacher, right? But he does this thing like he's doing it. His course, the stuff that he gets on YouTube is an extracurricular thing he does, and where he can put himself in that personality of being a teacher who some dude with a whiteboard who gets to point at things and and it's just like there's a certain person the same way that there's some guy who really wants to be that guy who's like who's going to tell you about how history works. And there's some other guy who's going to want to be that guy who tells you about how to solve your health problems, right? And have you tried, drinking more water, or something like this? Not that maybe it's a good idea, but, who wants to be that asshole going around telling people to drink more water, right? Have you tried, doing stretches and shut up, okay? Just shut up, okay? We're not, basically, I'm renouncing being the kind of person who if you don't want to come and book an hour an appointment and get me to solve all your life's problems for you, you're probably good for you. Congratulations that you got your life sorted out. You're not uncertain about the future. You're not worried about what's going on. You're not having an identity crisis. You don't need to understand what your purpose is in your life. You got it sorted out. You're doing good. If you're in a position where you're going to start shelling out big bucks to an astrologer or fortune, I think you could maybe have some problems, right? And there's this question. You got people who are so they could be taking advantage of all sorts of morons, basically, right? And if they're kind of people, like, I don't even know what kind of people are asking about, who are the people watching this? How do I know? I don't even know who any of you are. I can't make assumptions, basically, right? It's probably better not to. So for these reasons, I've decided it's best to throw in the towel and I'm going to take a hiatus. I'm going to take a break, and I'm going to perhaps I'm going to embrace a new era of not doing this YouTube bullshit. All right, thanks for watching.